Rebound by Philip Johnson. A crime story set in Stoke-on-Trent and moves to Bournemouth, Dorset.
Hello, 999. Which service do you require, please? Quick, please, send an ambulance, a medic. Someone's the beach opposite Harry Ramsden's, under Cliff Drive. There's a body. There doesn't appear to be any life in him at all. Sir, please stay on the line. And your name is? Billy Franklin. I live in Bournemouth. I was just walking the dog, you see. I'm on the early shift, and with it being light at 6ish, I thought I'd give Louis, my Labrador, an early run. Billy, can you check the gentleman's pulse? Could you look for any vital signs? Sometimes it's not apparent at first. Well, I'll try. I'm not very good at that sort of thing. He's a bit of a mess, I'm afraid. Look, don't worry, Billy. We've got someone on the way now. Is it possible for you to stay at the scene, please? I reckon within 5 minutes you'll be accompanied by someone. You're doing really well. If you can just stay there a little while longer. Would you like me to stay on the phone?
And so a chain of events had begun. The paramedics did their best, but the body was pronounced dead at 7:22 a.m. on the 25th of April 2018. By 8 a.m, the first officer on the scene arrived. She cordoned off the area with tape, drew a rough sketch of the scene, and interviewed the only witness, Billy. A few minutes later, forensics were taking photographs of the scene and, assisted by several other police officers, combed the surrounding sand, placing any items of interest into sealable bags, making a written inventory as they moved around. Dorset Constabulary had a serious crimes team, and at 9:15 in an unmarked car, DC John Dean approached the murder scene. Dean was very much old school, didn't suffer fools, and had a gruff, somewhat aggressive style. He'd plodded the mean streets of Birmingham for a couple of decades, but always fancied a transfer from the glamour and grime of a big city to the south coast. Eventually, he'd got what he wanted, but you wouldn't have known it. He still had plenty to complain about, and flatly refused to give up his strong Brummie accent. Right, who's the cock in here then? By this, DS Dean was inquiring which officer had been the first to attend the scene. He was also instilling an ironic impression that whoever it was in charge, it wasn't them any longer. He was. The first officer who'd arrived, PC Julianne Davis, stated it was she who'd taped off the area, who'd put in the call for a backup search party, had contacted forensics, as well as Dorset Police HQ at Winfrith, and had spoken to the witness. Dean asked, "Where is this witness, Billy Franklin, then?" Julianne pointed to the young fella, now seated on a bench at the edge of the promenade with a cup of tea and Louis, his dog, faithfully looking up at him. "Get him to HQ now. He might know more than he's letting on." Identification of the body had not been achieved yet, but then, as the victim's lightweight jacket was pushed gently to one side by a gloved officer, a logo badge was spotted on the breast pocket of his white shirt. The words Paradise Hotel Bournemouth, plus a picture of the hotel, a palm tree, and a small Union Jack flag in the corner. Someone was immediately onto the hotel, asked if any of the staff were missing, and were informed that Mike Redford's not turned up for breakfast duties, which had left them a little short-staffed. They said it was really unusual, as Mike Redford actually had a room on the premises, and a speculative knock on his door had produced no reply. The duty manager at the hotel was asked if all the staff who had been in contact and in the vicinity of Mike in the previous 24 hours could make themselves available for interview later in the day. Mike's overall manager and owner of the hotel, Thomas Jensen, was asked if he would be so cooperative as to come and identify the body. With formal identification carried out, the serious investigations could commence. It transpired that Mr. Redford had suffered a cut to the throat from behind, followed by 2 stabs resulting in piercings to his kidney and right-sided lung. The internal hemorrhaging which resulted from the attack had caused Mike to stagger side to side for just over 100 metres. He would have become confused, rapidly breathing, and eventually would have weakened and fell to his final resting place. The blood splatter analysis had shown that his big zigzag movements proved his blood pressure had dropped to a serious level, as he would have become disorientated as well as anxious. Forensics had set the approximate time of death at about midnight or shortly after. As Bournemouth had not quite hit peak season and there'd been a certain amount of wind overnight, no overnight walkers had crossed the sand. It being midweek rather than the weekend had also been a factor why no one had come across Redford's body. Hotel staff seemed to agree, as one, that Mike had been a popular bar manager, was also on the rota for breakfasts, lunches and dinners, and was an integral part of the laundry squad, as they liked to call themselves. The hotel manager, Mr. Jensen, was asked how he could justify employing someone and not using the pay-as-you-earn taxation system or contributing to Mike's workplace pension. HMRC, the tax people, would surely have many questions they'd be asking him. Mr. Jensen explained that, yes, it did seem unorthodox for someone to be paid in the form of meals and accommodations only, but apparently Mr. Redford had insisted being classed as self-employed and stated that the small cheque he received each month from the hotel would largely be saved for the end-of-year tax bill he received annually, and also would top up his private pension. The manager felt Mike was so trustworthy and reliable that that's what he's probably doing to ensure he was a legitimate employee then. But this was only a small feature in terms of the huge revelation that would be hitting not only Dorset police, but also the Paradise Hotel a few days later. The hotel were fairly sure that Mike Redford started life on Merseyside, working on the iconic ferry on the Mersey from age 15 to about 40, but had then trained quite late as a teacher, working for 18 years in Stoke-on-Trent, which was closest to the Crewe and All Saviour teacher training campus he'd graduated from. The hotel hadn't properly followed up Mike's references. They just took him at his word. But when the police computing department got hold of Mike's details and fed them through the central database system, something extraordinary happened. Mike Redford was still alive in the Potteries, still retired, still being very ordinary, golfing and caravanning, and not a lot else. The moment Dorset police contacted the nearest police station to Mike's home in Port Hill, Newcastle, Staffordshire, alarm bells rang. It didn't take long for an image of the deceased person's face to be sent to Stoke with the query, well, if this isn't Mike Redford, who is it? The guys on the desk took one look at the photo and said, Gibbons! So that's where the bugger absconded to, bloody Bournemouth. Once John Dean was made aware of the circumstances surrounding Jonathan Gibbons' disappearance, he made a very bold announcement to his team. Listen up, yo lot. This jack-the-lad teacher, Gibbons, was on the run from Stoke, and guess what for? Only gone and battered 3 of his ex-pupils, one after the other, in the space of just a few weeks. Bish bash bosh. He comes to Bournemouth all sneaky, the little twat, and howls himself up in a local hotel. There's barman, odd jobman, and chief bottle washer. The name of the hotel is, bloody ironic this, the Paradise Hotel. Yes, the very same one which has a 2-star hygiene rating and the one constantly ripped apart by comments on TripAdvisor. Paradise Hotel indeed. Johnny and Tom, get yourselves over to the Paradise shithole and give the staff a good grilling. I want to know, did Givens have any relationships with staff or customers? Did Givens have any visitors from Stoke? Did any groups of people or families from Stoke visit the Paradise? Did he have a set routine of behaviour so the assailant would know where and when Givens was likely to be on his own? Get your horses into gear and get up there now, all right? Frankie boy, you're with me. We're going in hard to see the Chief Superintendent. Loretta Squires, MBE. Mustn't forget the MBE. And I'm going to insist we drag these 3 shits back to Bournemouth to face the music. Pardon, Becky. What have I got for you? Can you coordinate lists of all who've stayed at the Paradise during the past 3 months? And if you think any of them stand out as potentially anti-Givens, say they're from his hometown, Stoke, then pass their info on to Dominic. He's a good lad. Pardon? Well, yes, Becky, that is all I've got for you at the moment. As they leave the meeting room, Dean turns to D.I. Frank Jameson and says, modern women, eh? Whatever next? As if it isn't bad enough the Chief Super being one of the skirt brigade. Now I've got Constable Rebecca Waddington thinking she's earned the right to be at the forefront of negotiations and investigations involving a bloody homicide, no less. She's only been in the team 5 minutes. Jesus wept. The pair walked the corridor to the office of Chief Superintendent Loretta Squires. Respected in all the constabularies along the south coast, who she has had to work alongside on a number of initiatives such as immigration, drugs and illegal trading procedures at the various ports and harbours. Her MBE was gained chiefly for initiating a programme whereby all the south coast of England police forces and all their corresponding police forces along the northern coast of France regularly held heads of department international meetings to share a heads up on various issues. Mostly, the virtual meetings are held online using the Microsoft Teams package, but once a year, the event is held in person, alternating between Jersey and Guernsey. As the men reached Miss Squire's door, they were confronted by the boss's PA, who insisted there was no need for Mr. Jameson to attend the meeting, as Miss Squires just needed Mr. Dean's attendance. Well, that's a load of crap, supposing there are complex operational tactics discussed that involve the whole team, not just me. It would have been good for Frankie to be present to offer a third opinion on how things might progress, and also he could have remembered vital pieces of information ready for the team briefing, if I happen to leave some stuff out accidentally like. Miss Squire's position was repeated. It was just to be D.S. Dean at the meeting. Dean tentatively knocked on the Chief Superintendent's door and waited to be summoned. Coming to this particular door used to be a very pleasant experience for D.S. Dean. As a young copper in the West Midlands Constabulary, he was one of the lads, one of the boys, a keen weightlifter, member of the rugby team based at Selly Oak, and organiser of darts nights, snooker nights and the like, which would invariably finish in town as a rowdy gentleman's club. One of the career cops who would join in some of the shenanigans was one Stephen Simonson, a guy destined for greater things. Stephen rose through the ranks to become deputy of the West Mids, and finally gaining his own patch, his own organisation, namely the top job at Dorset. Skip forward a few years and Stephen, as Chief Superintendent of Dorset, gets a request for transfer from one John Dean, who he remembered for his brash, loud persona in Birmingham. He valued not only John's organisational skills, but also his ability to get results. His detection rates were always ahead of the other detectives, a point not lost on the head honcho in Dorset. Yes, some of Mr. Dean's methods were only just within the law. He could be quite intimidating, but it might be just what Bournemouth, Poole and the slightly scarred and sleazy Weymouth needed. So Simonson had granted the request, and for 10 years he and John renewed their West Midlands connection on the south coast. True, he didn't like everything about John. His embarrassing opening line to people wore thin when you've heard it 20 or 30 times. "Hello, DS John Dean, pleased to meet you. To me friends, I'm known as Jimmy. Do you get it? But Jimmy Dean burned out young. I'm very much still glowing brightly, larger than life." Unfortunately for John Dean, though, Mr. Simonson fancied early retirement, and in 2014 he packed himself off to a very handsome small gîte in the Loire Valley of Western France, and had actually encouraged and sanctioned the promotion of Felicity Squires as his predecessor. The relationship between Dean and Squires was not really a match made in heaven. She'd made it very clear she was a woman of micro-political nuances. She understood civil liberties and accountability to the public, so that the police should always be acting in a morally justifiable code of conduct. Her shake-up of the force had led to several dinosaurs, such as John, exploring retirement packages, and it was clear this would be his last big case. The meetings with Loretta usually started pleasantly enough, but John knew that there would usually be some criticism coming his way.
"Good morning, DS Dean," Loretta began. "So, we have the murder of Mike Redford / Jonathan Givens to be delving into ASAP. But first, a couple of things. Coffee?"
No, thanks, ma'am. Just had a brew at briefing."
"And would that have been made for you, as usual, milk and 2 sugars, by Constable Waddington?"
Maybe. I don't quite... yeah, it was, come to think of it.
"Yes, and that's where some of our issues lie. You don't have an enthusiastic, rising star of the county gifted to you for secondment to take on the intricacies of investigations only, to then give her bloody tea-making duties and making a few phone calls here and there. Do you understand where I'm coming from, John? Rebecca is a capable, competent, driven member of the team, and whilst attached to you, should be shadowing some of your more senior interviewers and investigators in order to absorb a whole plethora of skills. I need her to take on before the next stage of her professional development. Are we clear, John?"
Yes, right, ma'am. Point taken. I'll attach her to Johnny and Tom. They'll be doing loads of interviews for the next few days.
Thank you. And I do not want her nipping out to the shops for the fellas and generally given menial tasks, which, frankly, they can do for themselves. They are big boys now, John. Which brings me on to another point I'd like to make. I've had not one, not two, but 3 comments / complaints about your macho posturing at inter-department and interdivisional meetings. Attendees state it doesn't take much pressure for you to blurt out, "Who's the cock in here then?" Please expand on what exactly is meant by that phrase, John. The cock means like cockerel, you know, the top guy, the boss, who either is in charge or thinks they're in charge, Mom.
Yes, as I thought. The cockerel is a symbol of male dominance. It's wrong on so many levels, John. Come on, this is 2018, not 1978. This is not an episode of that awful TV cop. What was his name? Played by John Thor.
The Sweeney, Mom.
The Sweeney, indeed. Put all of that claptrap behind you, John. It's a new world now out there. The criminals are way more sophisticated than they used to be. They're ahead of us in certain skill sets. Cybercrime, technology. We can't intimidate them, or indeed intimidate our colleagues with crass comments referring to a cockerel. Understand?
Anything else?
Well, there are actually, but I think there are more pressing matters to attend. So let's focus on the important rather than the trivial. What's your plan of action over the murder on the beach? Which reminds me, Gio's cocktail bar on the seafront has added Death on the Beach to his array of drinks. Rather tacky and tasteless, I've sent someone over to, shall we say, persuade Gio that the victim's family members might not have the same enthusiasm for his little joke, which has been shared on Facebook 14,000 times.
The victim ain't got any family, Mom.
Really? Someone's always got somebody in the deepest recesses of their lives, John. Are we sure?
Well, Mom, there's his deceased cousin's son, and that's it. He naffed off most of his ex-teaching colleagues
when he carried out those assaults.
And as for his closest friend, Mike Redford, well, he stole his identity, didn't he? So he could embark on this second life in Bournemouth. The staff at the Paradise seemed to rate him, though, so I guess he wasn't all bad.
OK, how are you going to approach the case? What angle are you taking, John?
Well, Mom, Redford had started life as Jonathan Givens, as a primary school teacher in Stoke-on-Trent.
Don't believe I've ever been to Stoke-on-Trent, John. Where is it?
You've never been there, Mom. You're one of the lucky ones. It's a dump. 1 hour north of Birmingham. They bang on about there. Stanley Matthews was the very first footballer of the year, long before Messi and Ronaldo. But they weren't banging on much when my team, the Blues, stuffed them.
John, can we leave football analogies out of our chat? I find it meaningless and tiresome, to be honest.
OK, Robbie Williams, the singer, take that.
Awful. Self-centred egotist. Any more?
Well, they used to make a bit of pottery there. Your granny probably had a Wedgwood dish or a vase and a couple of Dalton figures on a sideboard. You know, really outdated, boring stuff.
Don't you mean artistic artifacts of human skill and endeavour? I love Wedgwood and Spode. My hallway is very stylish and bespoke, John. It has real mint and tiles on the floor, just like many of the huge museums in London. You must have been to several of those, John.
No, I've never quite found the time to trouble them with my presence, Mom.
And what's that very articulate intellectual lady named who has the polka dot pieces? Yes, Emma Bridgewater. My kitchen is full of her handiwork. You got any, John?
Well, no, I just usually pick my stuff up in the local supermarket.
Oh, right, okay. Moving on. Now we've established what and where Stoke-on-Trent is. Enlighten me on suspects, motives, opportunities and so on.
Well, this Redford chap, when he was still Jonathan Givens, a teacher back in Stoke, he waited till he'd retired, stalked 3 ex-pupils who'd been, shall we say, troublesome, located them carefully so he knew they'd be alone, and battered
each of them quite methodically. So, they'd taken a fair old pasting, but other than a couple of broken bones, it was mainly superficial stuff, like bites and bruising, that sort of thing. A bit of cold retribution. He bore grudges against his 3 worst students and decided to give them something to remember him by. Am I close, John? Pretty spot on, Miss Ma'am. So after lots and lots of plodding by Stoke police, eventually, after 5 years, they realised Givens is the only one who's fallen out with all 3 of these specimens. But John, fools rush in, etc., etc. We do occasionally have muggings and assaults and jealous husbands and drug deals, fallouts, even in Bournemouth. Is there any chance of... No chance, Ma'am. This was personal. An 8-inch blade. This is an execution. Carried out for a reason. There's nothing random about this one. Now, in 2014, Mr. Givens systematically pieced together a whole new life in Dorset. Yes. Tell me more about the assaults, though. Well, there'd been nothing sexual. They were ABH jobbies. They'd all had regular lifestyles where, if you were a little bit in the know about sort of following people's whereabouts on Facebook, it wasn't too difficult to discover where these 3 were liable to be alone, vulnerable at certain hours of the night. Givens, apparently, followed them. Then dished out a series of batterings. Now, interestingly, in his recorded interviews at Hanley... No, it can't be that. It must have been something like Hanley Police Station in Stoke. Givens at first appeared to not know the 3. Then he could recall teaching them. And only after some serious prompting with his metaphorical arm tied up behind his back did he admit that they were all, in fact, bad apples. Squires assessed the situation. So what's the presumption here? A young man, I presume they're young, is going to risk his liberty, his future career, his family life, etc., on stabbing to death his ex-teacher, a teacher who might be responsible for giving the lad a bit of a slap after the pubs have closed. Plus, it's a bit of a journey down here. He'll surely know that motorways and train stations can all have CCTV checked to see if he was in Bournemouth last week. And he'll have been missing from Stoke for a good 8 hours? 10 hours even? That's a lot of alibi time to fill in, John, unless you've got an extremely compliant wife or girlfriend or whatever. DS Dean, I want you to tread very lightly at first. Find out what Stoke Police's initial gut feelings are. Ask them to get onto the 3 lads' employers to see if they were missing at all from workplaces at the appropriate times, and we'll take it from there, starting with the most likely suspect to the least likely. Understood? With all due respects, Mom, I've done some preliminary reading on these 3, and they're not your typical everyday guys. One of them in particular has got violence as a hobby. There's drugs. There's affiliations with the criminal world. They're just the sort who wouldn't let an assault slip away without some sort of response. I think we should go after them, even if it means the expense of transporting them down here. People do tend to be more open to discussions when they're in a neutral spot away from the comfort and protection of their families. DS Dean, I think I made myself clear. Tread carefully. There are 700,000 residents in Dorset. Surely there must be a handful of our own miscreants under the microscope before the trio from up north. Do your homework. Very well, Ma'am. Full steam ahead. I'll keep you updated at regular intervals. Yes, do. You must. DS Dean wandered back down the corridor, shoulders hunched. Not only did he feel the 3 lads from Stoke were temporarily off the hook, he also felt society's judgmental arms holding him back, tying his hands, and that barrier came in the form of C.S. Loretta Squires. Back at the incident room, Dean was in no mood to hold back though. The clock was ticking as his retirement date was set for September. 3 months to nail one of these 3 gits would be his mantra to himself from now. But he knew that building a case against someone who knew how to play the system was likely to take much longer than that. Firstly, they needed to check CCTV from all the cameras of pubs, cafes, restaurants and shops leading from the Paradise Hotel up on Westcliff Gardens down to the seafront and under Cliff Drive where Jonathan Given's body was found. Detailed interviews with staff revealed that for the first 3 years, Jonathan had taken his time off in the afternoons and would go for a stroll along the beach roughly between 2:30pm when lunch duty was over and 4pm when he'd return to the hotel and begin prepping the tables for dinner, as well as carrying out stock checks at the bar to see what was required. But in recent months, his strolls tended to be taken after evening bar duty, about 11:30pm. No one could accurately assess why this change in behaviour had taken place, but he'd also been seen occasionally smoking a cigarette and looking pensive, absorbed somewhat, as if something was playing on his mind. Perhaps he'd got away with his ruse for over 3 years, but now accepted this would probably not be the case forever. Now that more was known about Jonathan's income circumstances, it might have been a concern that hotel manager Mr. Jensen had been pressing him throughout 2017 to consider setting up a workplace pension. It was to become mandatory from 2018, and Mr. Jensen couldn't understand why Jonathan, or Mike Redford, was reluctant to give up his national insurance number and his teaching pension ID so the hotel could go through the correct channels. Perhaps that was what Mr. Givens perceived would be bringing his sojourn to the South Coast to an end. He'd said to Mr. Jensen on a number of occasions that he preferred his current arrangement, board and lodgings as payment, a monthly cheque to cover any overtime, and all tips from customers to be kept by Jonathan as pocket money. Jensen stated that wouldn't be possible anymore. His personal accountant had previously looked at various ways of creatively compensating Mr. Givens without going through the normal HMRC, PAYE and national insurance route. But now, with this workplace pensions legislation, then Jonathan would have to gain his details and hand them over to the hotel by early 2018. The fact that Jonathan had even stretched the story as long as he had, that it was proving incredibly difficult to get HMRC to release his serial numbers, had only got him this far because Mr. Jensen was supervising a complete overhaul of the hotel. A backer had been found to refresh the premises entirely, despite the woefully poor reviews on TripAdvisor, Booking.com and so on. And this work would start fairly shortly. Mr. Givens had confided in one of the other staff that he didn't see why Jensen had to force him to have a workplace pension when it clearly would have ruined the tax-free status of his teaching pension that fell just underneath the threshold. He also suggested that he might look for a room in one of the many hostels, boarding houses and B&Bs in the area and simply work cash in hand as a gardener or even one-to-one home tuition to children by placing written advertisements in local shop windows. That was to be his next plan of action, but he never got round to putting it into action. Meanwhile, DS Dean had a team of officers scouring every still of every film footage from the night in question and had plotted on the wall in the incident room exactly where Jonathan had walked that night. The first 300 yards indicated he'd only passed 2 people. Very quiet indeed. But then, as he approached the Oceanarium on the seafront, a shadowy figure appeared to be standing smoking, staring into his mobile phone, but furtively looking over his shoulder in Jonathan's direction. A dark tracksuit and baseball cap more or less provided cover, and the next time we see the two in the same frame is further along the beach, but the images from Harry Ramsden's Chip restaurant are grainy, black and white, and lack clarity. The attack is sort of recorded with vague stabbing motions registered, and then the assailant moves eastwards along Undercliff Drive, which he'll know is camera free. So lots of images pre-attack, but precious little post-attack. Dean shouted out to the team, "But at least we now know he's average build. That's got to be worth something, hasn't it?" But the reply from one of the officers liaising with the police in Stoke didn't sound hopeful. It transpired that Dean's 3 prime suspects were, in height order, 5'7", 5'8", and 5'9". You couldn't put together a trio of more average builds. None of them particularly slim or overweight, just like the shadowy figure on the screen. Dean insisted that Stoke Police, part of Staffordshire Police, tread extremely carefully when making tentative inquiries to the employers of the 3 suspects in Stoke. One slip-up, one word whispered in the wrong place, and if the boys were told that Dorset Police were onto them, then considering ex-teacher Givens had done a runner after only being charged with ABH, then surely someone on a murder charge would do likewise. Dean also stated that any employer who passed on information to one of the 3 suspects about police interest would be classed as an associate of a murderer, an accomplice. Due to divulging sensitive information to someone under suspicion, and subsequently would be charged with an offence. The information gleaned by Staffordshire at first threw up more questions than answers, but it was important to collate as much data as possible before any potential dawn swoop on the 3, and possibly being driven to Dorset for interrogation. It turned out that Francis Harris, once of the Festival Park 10-pin bowling franchise, was now a door supervisor at the city centre casino, just half a mile away. He worked for a private security company, GB Security Solutions, whose owner, Gary Barton, was known for being able to handle himself, as well as being very close to that community who live in an alternative twilight zone to everyone else, namely the night entertainment community. Yes, there were many professional and law-abiding personnel involved in this company, but there was also an element of steroid-driven bodybuilders, ex-drug addicts and dealers, and people with links to VAT fraud practices and so on. Barton stated that Harris was a good lad, could be relied upon to maintain a steady presence at the casino's entrance, and knew how to be polite and friendly when the occasion demanded, but also could turn on the assertiveness and surliness, for example, if there was a stag party causing problems. Barton revealed that Harris was not working on Wednesday the 25th of April, but was covering the casino door from midday on the 26th. Dean stated, "That's one of the twats in the frame. He had plenty of time to drive down Wednesday evening, do his thing, straight back to Stoke in the early hours, and at work by noon." Next up was Lawrence Beaumont. His boss at the Moat House Hotel was Miss Aisha Khan. Her reference of Beaumont was not quite as glowing as Harris had received from his boss. She stated that Beaumont used to work in the gym, but had asked if he could work on the bar because it was livelier, the pay was slightly more, and there were opportunities to earn tips as well as pick up extra shifts due to daytime bridal fairs, weddings and the November and December party season. They hadn't actually been impressed with his work standards in the gym, but decided that the change in scenery and status might bring about a change in his sullen exterior. The move wasn't entirely successful. His mum, sister and their partners, plus assorted friends, would often traipse into the bar area, spend several hours propped up on stools by the bar, which would distract Lawrence from his duties, and the till's takings would often appear to be a bit light. Miss Khan said, "He's either providing free drinks to his family or he's pocketing the money for himself. We've recently had a tracking system installed and we'll be able to see on a monthly basis if the income matches the volume of alcohol that's been shifted. I'll have to get back to you on that one." She stated that he definitely worked on both evenings, 26th and 27th of April, which absolved him of being physically involved with the murder, but, eerily, when there was a large dinner dance party arranged at the hotel or a tribute musical evening, it was one of the bar manager's tasks to book door security for the event. Miss Khan stated that Beaumont always used GB Security Solutions, but not only that, he always specifically requested Francis Harris be sent if Harris was not on duty at the casino that night. She says the pair of them were always delighted to see each other with hugs and fist bumps, and that after hours they'd sit in the bar area drinking, chatting, reminiscing, but often almost at whisper level, as if there was some big secret that no one else could be allowed to share. When Dean read this statement, he yelped, "Gotcha! That's the connection we've been looking for, the link. Nice." It hadn't been lost on Dean also that Harris's change of employment had taken him literally up the road, whilst Beaumont's change of employment meant him moving literally 35 yards. Those Stokies are not exactly gregarious, mobile, career ladder climbers, are they? Also, they've both lived at the same addresses all their adult lives, and less than a mile apart too. Don't Stoke people have ambition? They don't move around much, do they? The whole of the incident room fell about with laughter. Not that they thought Dean was the next Peter Kay or Michael McIntyre, just that they were fairly frightened of him and couldn't wait for his retirement so they could be free from the occasional verbal tsunami he'd throw at someone if they'd upset him. These were often accompanied by a bucketful of Dean's saliva. Lovely. "The one with the temper, Harris, has done it. Aided and abetted by that barfly, Beaumont. Ironic or what, how Beaumont and Givens ended up both being hotel bar managers?" When someone intervened and suggested they should first consider the statement given by Jake Tomlinson's employer, Tomlinson being the third suspect, Dean blasted, "Go on then, hit me with it, but I'm telling you, Harris with the knife, Beaumont in the role of instigator, agitator, and perhaps a little logistical help. Now what about Tomlinson? Don't tell me he still does the same fucking job he did 9 years ago, and he lives in a flat above Beaumont's house. It wouldn't surprise me with these three." Dean was then told that Jake Tomlinson brought his own unique set of circumstances to the table, as he was now a delivery driver with the DPD service. Nothing exciting about that, unless you're told that on Wednesday the 25th of April he had 2 rather large deliveries of Church Hill tableware ceramics to Southampton Airport and to the ferry port at Portsmouth. Dean shrugged his shoulders and asked, "So?" He didn't like any of his hunches being questioned, challenged, and certainly not if that person confronting him appeared to have better evidence backing up his or her theory. It was pointed out that Tomlinson was the only member of the 3 suspects definitely in the vicinity of anywhere remotely near Bournemouth on the appropriate date. "Well," Dean inquired, "well, surely you've inquired with DPD if Tomlinson's route and timings have been traced." Don't drivers have to have one of those tracker devices? Surely that'll answer how long he was out on the road. And don't they have GPS built in these days, so we'd be able to see where the bugger's been? The answer came back that Tomlinson had departed Stoke 1 p.m. and by early evening had been tracked returning north. But it was suggested to Dean, what if perhaps all three of them were colluding? Maybe, just maybe, Tomlinson had taken Harris with him on the delivery run. Harris could have then done the business, so to speak, and then what if Beaumont had driven down and picked him up, ready for the return journey? Dean had to admit it was a good idea. I like your thinking, you crazy genius. This is blue sky stuff, this is. Listen, I've got to go and do a video conference call with those two Muppet detectives in Stoke who knew Givens had assaulted those lads and then let him go. What I want and what we need is photo evidence of Harris inside Tomlinson's DPD van heading south on the Wednesday afternoon. Check all the motorway cameras between 1pm and 5pm. You know, the M6, the M5, the M40, all of them. And then we want vehicle registration recognition of either Harris's or Beaumont's car on the return journey. Try the back roads as well. Doesn't the A34 go all the way to Stoke? I know it's going to take hours and hours of staring at screens, but we've got this team, and Miss Perfect Pantsleret, to squeeze in, BE, has allocated us 3 extra staff for all that. Now we're rocking the joint. Come on, people. And he was off. As the doors closed behind him, several of the team looked at each other, bemused, as if to say, what a knob. Dean had arranged a video conference Skype call with the 2 detectives originally assigned to the Jonathan Givens case and who had made the decision to charge him with actual bodily harm against Harris, Beaumont and Tomlinson. Sat in an interview room back in Stoke was DS Henry Jackson and DI John Spencer. DS Dean settled into his chair and immediately went on the offensive. The start of the Skype online meeting went something like this. Right, how's the cock in here then? Jackson immediately replied, beg your pardon. Dean came back with, who's in charge, I mean? Who's the top dog? My name's John Dean, DS John Dean. Jimmy to me friends. Pleased to meet you. We're discussing the Jonathan Givens case, yes? Who are you? Who's who? Jackson responded, hello, I'm DS Henry Jackson, and seated to my left is D.I. John Spencer. It was most unfortunate to hear of the violent ending to the life of Jonathan Givens. We met him several times, always very elusive, mercurial, gave little away, had an answer to most of our questioning, so quite methodical and deliberate in his actions. Dean, but what I want to know is if you were so sure he was guilty. Because let's face it, you charged him with ABH. Why did you let the slippery one do a runner, leaving yo lot looking like Elsa from Frozen? Let him go. That's what you did. Spencer replied, Mr. Dean, I think you'll find that the CPS felt that bail conditions would be appropriate for Mr. Givens due to A, his unblemished career as a teacher with references to match, B, his previous record of having never been charged with anything of a criminal nature, not even a parking ticket, C,
his age, and D, his willingness to give up his passport and report in every day at his closest police station. And so they deemed Mr. Givens as someone who was extremely unlikely to reoffend and also unlikely to abscond. Dean: got that one spot on, didn't they? Leaving the Dorset guys the horrible, nasty job of cleaning up your shit now that Givens has been topped,
Jackson: not sure I appreciate your assertions, Mr. Dean. We followed all of the correct protocols to a T. Mr. Givens was astute, wily, enigmatic even. And to be fair, he did exist illegally for 4 years in Bournemouth. I mean, didn't his manager at the hotel carry out any form of identification when he employed him? Is there not a culture of cash in hand, unofficial black market work that goes on in your typical holiday destinations?
Spencer: I think what Mr. Jackson is trying to establish is that Mr. Givens' circumstances were thoroughly investigated and we were highly confident of securing a prosecution, but...
Dean: you're telling me you thoroughly investigated him?
5 years it took before an arrest was made.
I mean, come on. Even in sleepy Dorset, we get things done a bit quicker than that.
The response from Jackson was immediate.
Mr. Dean, sleepy Dorset is also relatively wealthy Dorset, with your sandbanks, millionaires, etc., and your low incidence of drugs, assaults and the like.
Dean retorted.
Low incidence of assaults? We've got a great big fat juicy murder on our hands to clean up now, thanks to you guys. One Stokey runs away to the south coast on a jolly. 3 other Stokies follow him there, slice him up, and now I've got to sort it out. Cheers, guys.
Spencer intervened.
Mr. Dean, we were going through the peak of austerity measures during that period. There was a handful of murders and offences much more serious than ABH to investigate. Our dwindling team of investigators had to prioritise and place certain items very much at the top of the list, whilst others slipped down and were relegated to the bottom. As those 3 lads made fairly swift recoveries and got back to their lives, themselves and their parents contacted us less and less to ask what developments were being made, and so I'm afraid time slipped away. Dean: from what I've seen, you got lucky when that cafe owner told you about Mr. Givens' internet activity. For me, without him, you would have been stuffed.
Jackson:
yes, well, we all need a spot of random luck now and again. Lots of hard graft with a sprinkling of opportunity usually wins the day,
Dean decided to move the conversation on.
Gentlemen, what if I told you that my generally efficient and competent team had put forward a theory that possibly the 3 Stoke lads have been collaborating, and one of them is the guy who stabbed Givens? If a gun was held to your head and you had to say which one of them had the bottle, the mental strength, the aggression to do such a thing, who would you say did it if you had to name one?
Jackson and Spencer pondered over this query for a while, looked at each other, and then faced the screen. In unison they said, Harris. Jackson explained further. Of the 3, Harris is the only one who you'd place a bet on to win a fight. He's aggressive, can handle himself. He's a doorman, for God's sake, what we used to refer to as a bouncer. The other 2, I don't know, maybe they could provide assistance to the operation in other ways, like money, cars, concealing weapons, that sort of thing.
Dean seemed pleased with this suggestion. Thank you very, very much. If we look at their movements, work commitments, etc., Harris was the only one in the frame. And let's face it, Givens wasn't wrong about the other two, was he? Beaumont's a mummy's boy, and Pervy Tomlinson wouldn't have the balls. Thanks, gents. That's been a big help. We'll crack on now. Jackson just couldn't help asking Dean the following. But D.H. Dean, aren't you throwing all of your eggs into one basket? Forgive my grandmother's turn of phrase. Do they not have at least some criminals in Bournemouth? Mike Givens have developed relationships with anyone who could have turned on him. He has been there 4 years and worked amongst a staff of between 6 and 12 colleagues at a time. Friendships do form, and so on. Dean. Mr. Jackson, we're exploring all possibilities. I just think that the 3 Stoke fellas are the only ones with the motive to go and do this sort of thing. He led quite a gentle, easy-going sort of existence, did Givens. Down here, and we're yet to find that he ruffled any feathers at all. The closest he came to falling out with anyone was when his hotel manager, Mr. Jensen, was legally obliged to insist Mr. Givens take out a workplace pension. And Givens was resisting that. We've looked at Jensen, plus others higher up in the hotel's organisation. Might they have wanted him out of the way, as his cash-in-hand status was illegitimate and could have caused them a headache? But we've concluded no chance, not a chance. So we're keeping an open mind, but I don't mind sharing with you. Horace is my man. He's my man, he's got it written all over him. You know, Dorset are sending up 3 cars tomorrow for a 6 a.m. pickup. Now in Harris, he'll just be getting in from the casino. I think I'll put an extra bit of muscle in his car. As for the other pair, they'll crap themselves. Goodbye, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your help. Dean marched out of the room, chuntering to himself, pair of wankers. Under his breath, due to their suggestion that Harris, Beaumont and Tomlinson might not be the only 3 people in the UK capable of killing Jonathan Givens. But he couldn't see past this hunch, and there was no time to be sidetracked and distracted. The clock was ticking. Retirement was looming. He was used to being the victor, not the loser, and he didn't want to exit the job that he loved on a downer. He arrived back in the incident room. Right, who's in charge of logistics for tomorrow's dawn raids? I want 3 officers to pick up Harris. The other pair will only need 2 in each motor, because Beaumont and Tomlinson are tossers. Okay, guys, this is it. Let's do it. I'll just run it past Bossy Pants Squires, and it'll be green for go. The meeting with Miss Squires, MBE, John's chief superintendent, didn't go all John's way, but he grudgingly just about had her agreement that the lifting of the 3 Stoke lads from the comfort of their beds could take place in the morning, on the condition that all 3 suspects were offered the chance for legal representation immediately, and that those solicitors could even travel down with their clients if they wished, so as to ascertain that there had been no inappropriate questioning of the fellas during the long journey. That's good, thought John, privately to himself, as he reasoned that none of them would summon a solicitor that quickly, so they'd have to make do with one from the duty rota in Bournemouth, who wouldn't know anything about the case and would therefore put John's team at an advantage. There was one sour point in the conversation, though. Squires noted that an officer had reported to her that some of the male locker room banter amongst the incident team had bordered on unprofessional. It had been paraphrased that one officer had asked John if he'd been any good at rugby back in his Birmingham days. John's reply had been, "No, but I'm good at fighting." Squires had then lectured him about the only legitimate fighting was under Queensberry rules in a boxing ring or in the controlled, supervised environment of martial arts. John had to bite his lip and apologise. Squires had rubbed salt into his wound by suggesting that it was probably good timing that he was about to retire, as the police force had moved on from the military-style machismo of the previous century. DS Dean was convinced it was the recent recruit to the team, Rebecca Waddington, who had blabbed to Squires about his rugby quip. But he couldn't afford to let it bother him. Tomorrow would be a huge, momentous day, and he needed to sit with his trusted right-hand man now, D.I. Frank Jameson, and develop a strategy for the long-haul questioning they'd be doing tomorrow. Meanwhile, other pieces of information were filtering through to the incident room. And eventually reaching DS Dean, if the team thought it was crucial enough. One development had come about after hours and hours of scouring through the social media entries of all those who had stayed at the Paradise Hotel in recent months. This painstaking operation had involved contacting all of the clients and requesting rather than demanding access to their Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Twitter accounts to peruse whether Jonathan Givens, as known as Mike Redford, actually appeared on any photographs or is mentioned in any texts. The team noted that about 1/3 of clients they contacted were very reticent to cooperate. Dean muttered, "The phrase extramarital affairs springs to mind." Also, some admitted their social media accounts contained personal, sensitive, intimate events which they could not possibly release into the general circulation. Detectives had to soothe their fears by saying only the murder inquiry team would be viewing such material and they could apply for legal access to their accounts. But it was clear that a number of those contacted knew that the Dorset Constabulary probably didn't have the resources to go to such extremes and prosecute. Just on the slight chance, they spotted a murder victim in the background of a photograph. Former Paradise Hotel customers who didn't cooperate were asked to at least check through their data from around the time of their stay at the Paradise and the weeks after their visit, when they would have been sharing items from recent trips. Dean was particularly interested in finding out if anyone from Stoke and North Staffordshire had stayed there in the previous 6 months, but that period coincided with the quietest time of year for the hotel, i.e. October to April. In that time, there had been just one Staffordshire liaison, where the chap had insisted on paying cash and had given a false address in Stoke-on-Trent. He was one that got away. But there was an interesting group of mixed-age ladies from Stoke who'd stayed there for 2 nights in February for a David Bowie-themed weekend. They had 2 twin rooms and stated that Givens had been reasonably happy to converse with them in his fake Scouse accent in the guise of Mike Redford. But he declined to come and have a dance with them while the Ziggy Stardust tribute band were into their finale on the second night, when they were much more relaxed. In a party mood, they hugged him and even had photographs taken with him. Something interesting did evolve from this revelation. One of the 4 ladies, Sue Doyle, actually worked at the Moat House Hotel as a cook. Not in the same vicinity as Beaumont in the bar, but he was in the same staff WhatsApp group of 24 members and could have, or probably had, seen the photograph of an apprehensive Jonathan Givens in a group photo with the 4 girls, even though he is sort of turning sideways. On reflection, Dean said, "Of course he's trying to conceal his identity. He knows these 4 birds are from Stoke and that any one of them might be related to or friendly with one of our trio of twats." Another one of the girls, Jackie Burrows, worked with Jake Tomlinson's sister at a retail store in the Trentham estate, just south of Stoke-on-Trent, and had become quite friendly with Hannah Tomlinson. Surely she would have shared photos from the crazy Bowie weekend with her. But did Jonathan Givens resemble the dark-haired youngish teacher from Etruria now that he was in his 60s, with no hair, a beard, and constantly wore a clear-framed glasses in order to look totally different from his days in the potteries? In fact, a fellow bar worker at the Paradise had once picked up Jonathan's glasses off a table at the Paradise and said, "Oi, I've just borrowed these, mate. Forgotten mine. I've got to sign me timesheet." "What the? There's no magnification in these. They're neither use nor ornament. Can't see a bleeding thing in these, Mike." Jonathan, a.k.a. Mike, had then had to explain that his reading eyesight was fine, but he had very delicate pupils, which were prone to allergies and fungal growth. So he wore the glasses just as a protection against infection, that sort of thing. It sounded feasible, so his colleague never brought up the subject again. Now, the tricky part of this particular investigation was going to be whether or not Sue Doyle's photograph had ever been seen by Beaumont, work colleague, or whether Jackie Burrow's photo had been seen either by Tomlinson or Tomlinson's sister, Hannah. It was something that D.S. Dean was fixated about, and he was going to have to keep a clear head and an almost zen-like composure if he was to get through the next day's interviews without hyperventilating or losing control. His number 2 DI, Frank Jameson, was shrewd, yes, calculating even. But even he knew that if Dean went in with all the usual, "Who's the cock in here?" or "I'm good at fighting" nonsense, then legal representatives for the suspects would waft away Dean's accusations and claim that their clients were being victimised. And so to decision day, Dean and Jameson approached the interview rooms with some trepidation, some excitement, and on Dean's part, an overzealous commitment and determination that the day would be his and not Harris, Beaumont or Tomlinson's. There had been some shenanigans when one Francis Harris had been collected from his home address and had to be forcibly dragged into the unmarked police car at 5:45, ready for the 3.5-hour drive to the south coast. Harris had resisted arrest, and it had taken all 3 Dorset officers to handcuff him, deliver him to the backseat of the car and escort him without engaging verbally with him. He was offered bottles of water and energy cereal biscuit type snacks with the promise of breakfast on reaching Bournemouth. Afterwards, at 10 a.m, the conducting of the interview began with a duty solicitor in attendance, more as an observer than anything else, although he did indicate on several occasions when Dean's questioning, shall we say, careered off at a tangent. Examples of D.S. Dean's sheer sarcasm and aggression included this as an introduction. "Well, I never. Francis Harris. We finally meet. I'm D.S. John Dean. You can call me Jimmy if you like. And seated next to me is another Francis, my reliable colleague, D.I. Frank Jameson. Welcome to Dorset. Again." Harris didn't understand that final word. "Again? What you on about, again? I've never set foot in this place before, ever. So you can shut off that word, again, once and for all." Dean knew that Harris had a short fuse, as demonstrated a few hours earlier in Stoke, so he went for the scattergun approach, plying him with theory after theory, interspersed with accusations, so that Harris's brief had difficulty getting a word in. "So you're telling me you did not have a vengeful vendetta against one ex-teacher, Jonathan Givens, who might have bruised your skull, and bust your nose on a dark night in Stoke many moons ago. You're saying you did not have private conversations with one Lawrence Beaumont at the Moat House Hotel bar about what you'd be doing to Givens, and I suppose you do not have convictions for violence, amongst other things, against drunken revellers when you've been playing the big I am and the big hard man bouncer role. Your dad used to like slapping your mum, didn't he? You were no better, battering inebriated small guys on a night out. That's really brave, that is. Shut the fuck up, cop, yeah? Harris retorted. I hadn't seen that prick Givens since primary school, apart from that night that Stoke Police, not me, Stoke Police, said he attacked me. I was a little shit at school, and if he feels I wrecked his career in some way, then all I've got is respect for him that he put his money where his mouth was and dealt me a few blows. Good for him. Proud of the punts, not angry with him. And that, sir, is the law of the concrete jungle. You should know that coming from Birmingham. That is where you're from, isn't it, with that accent? Oh, yeah, Handsworth, Aston, Lascelles, Balsall Heath. All lovely places, aren't they? You should know that more than anyone. If you dish it out, you have to be able to take it. I was the original pain in the arse at school, so if Givens got his revenge, I'd like to say I raised a glass for him on the day I'd heard he'd been stabbed to death, and I said, Mr. Givens, I'm sorry I was a complete fucking nuisance, mate. I don't hold it against you for whacking me that night, that's if it was you. And no one deserves to go out like that, being stabbed. Horrible, horrible. I was so shocked, mate. Now, this was not what Dean had expected to hear. Harris had actually praised Givens instead of showing any vindictiveness towards him. Furthermore, he was showing actual remorse for having been a difficult pupil at school and causing Givens a torrid time. This was extremely skillful of Harris. Perhaps he'd prepared and rehearsed such an eloquent speech, but it had certainly put Dean on the back foot. Jameson could see his colleague was struggling a little, a bit in shock, and so he took up John's points numbers 2 and 3 again. In a slightly understated Mancunian accent, Jameson began. Mr. Harris, did you not take up a position at the bar of the Moat House Hotel, Stoke-on-Trent, and have very private, hushed conversations with one of our suspects, Lawrence Beaumont? Witnesses state that you took extreme measures to not be overheard, even cupping your hand over your mouth, drawing Beaumont into you physically, so you could whisper in his ear, and generally looking furtively over your shoulders if anyone should come near to the two of you. Can you not see why that would arouse suspicion? Harris replied, again, candidly and brazenly. Sir, I work in a sodding casino on the door. Lots of people who, shall I say, live slightly outside legal boundaries, frequent the place. I get to know big-time gamblers, people involved in the drugs trade, both addicted and sellers, ladies of a questionable profession, those who sometimes boast about what they've been up to, how much money they're making and what they're currently getting away with. Now, I'm not going to broadcast this stuff for all and sundry, am I? That could lead to self-inflicted complications and all, because I couldn't keep my traps shut. But occasionally, now and then, I might share information with a few selected people from a personal entertainment point of view. If Beaumont happened to be on the receiving end of one of my anecdotes, then good for him. But I can guarantee you it wouldn't have been a very exciting story, and it would have been just to pass the time. Other than that,
I don't think it's got anything to do with anyone what me and a mate are yapping about. Just more idle gossip. Got anything else? Well, can you see why you might be in the firing line of our suspicions, Mr. Harris? I mean, there's been 2 drop charges against you, both for GBH. A disturbance of the peace. Harris interrupted. Yeah, 6 friggin' years ago when I was a lot younger and a lot more stupid. Anyway, I was fired for that. And I did 100 hours community service, so I can't see. At this point, Harris's solicitor duly noted that Jameson and Dean were relying on historical cases of Harris which could not in any way be linked to the current inquiries, and so irrelevant. Harris also gave a very good performance of someone not in any way linked to the Givens case. As the interview neared its close, Dean made it quite obvious the case was taking over his better judgment as he yelled at Harris, "Don't you worry, mate. We'll get one of those 2 scrotums singing like a canary. And when they drop you in it and tell us what really happened, you'll be serving life jail." Harris merely laughed as he was taken to one of the holding cells. Next up to be interviewed was Lawrence Beaumont. DS Dean immediately went on the offensive. "What's a little lad like you doing on the south coast, more than 200 miles from home, and no mummy in attendance to protect you?" Beaumont's duty solicitor stepped in sharply and warned Dean about his phrasing of questions. Dean was told it was not permissible for his questioning to be intimidating, should not be designed in such a way as to incite his client or entice him into an argument, and should adhere to strict guidelines which only focus on the crime relating to the death of Jonathan Givens. Very clear parameters, in other words, with no scope for deviation. He then whispered something to Beaumont, and for the rest of the interview, the suspect resorted to monotone responses of "no comment." After the 24th repetition of this dull, banal phrase, Dean and Jameson ended the interview. But John couldn't help heckling Beaumont one more time. "If we keep you out overnight, perhaps Mummy could drive down and tuck you in." John knew he'd be in trouble for that parting shot, but with a few weeks remaining to retirement, he no longer cared. Finally, on to Jake Tomlinson. As he entered the room, DS Dean sang the 1974 Hot Chocolate song Emmeline to himself at volume, but with the title changed to Emily. Emily, Emily, to antagonise Jake, as Emily was the name of the thoroughly decent ex-girlfriend whom he'd attacked a decade or so previously. Once more, Dean couldn't resist a quip. "Don't worry, we've locked up all our daughters once we knew that a predator from Stoke who attacks defenceless girls was in town." Tomlinson shouted back, "Bollocks! All that business was sorted out long ago, so don't start with any of that, youth." Tomlinson's solicitor advised DS Dean to stay within legally accepted investigative boundaries. "Dean, who's been secretly contacting Givens and suggested a mate-up that night?" He went further than that. Further than he normally walks past the oceanarium. Was it that Harris took the whole thing a bit too far? I bet he was only supposed to frighten him. Is that what happened? Was it supposed to be just a pasting for what happened in Stoke in 2009? I bet it was not part of the plan for him to be sliced open like a pig at an abattoir. Why did Harris do it, Mr. Tomlinson? Jameson knew that this was not
part of the plan of action that he and John had agreed. But John was getting desperate. He was taking crazy chances, taking liberties, and the sweat on his brow and top lip indicated, if anything, the case was not being kind to his mental health. Tomlinson: listen, we've always fantasised about getting our own back on Givens, but what happened to him was 5 levels above what any of us would have intended for him. Dean: fantasised? That's a strong word, wouldn't you say? In my experience, anyone who's fantasised about doing something eventually does it. Do you know what I mean? Tomlinson responded: yeah, well, we didn't, right? Well, at least I didn't. Can't vouch for the other two, though, can I? Not 100% anyway. Dean saw this comment potentially as the first sign that 2 of the 3 might eventually turn on the one who carried out the crime, and he was fairly convinced it was Harris. But at this point, D.I. Jameson stepped in. Mr. Tomlinson, would you say it is fair to assume that you know a Miss Jackie Burrows quite well? Tomlinson: Jackie who? Jameson: Jackie Burrows, you know, the one who works with your sister, Hannah, at the Trentham estate. Tomlinson protested: I hadn't spoken to Hannah in 10 years, maybe more. Jameson prodded him: and why would that be? Tomlinson responded: all that crap over the ex where I was supposed to have ruined her life or something like that. Dean intervened: but you did put her in hospital, you did ruin her life, and your only escape from charges was because Daddy's connections, isn't that right? Tomlinson: we negotiated a settlement so I could walk away from that situation. Not sure, though, how I'm supposed to have ruined her life. Miss Snotty-Nose is already head of department at a high school and no doubt tipped for a golden future, unlike me driving up and down motorways delivering like a frigging muppet. Dean responded: poor soul, my heart bleeds for you. Jameson: so, what we're trying to establish is that following a weekend spent at Jonathan Given's workplace, namely the Paradise Hotel, Dean interjected: yeah, it's a real Class A joint where all top-notch society people go to dance to a crap Bowie tribute band and then they jump into bug-ridden beds with each other. Nice. Tomlinson: well, you don't sound very sophisticated to me, mate, but if you're trying to rile me over me sister, I wouldn't bother because we don't fucking speak, right? Dean: you've seen her Facebook page with the snaps of Givens on. He wasn't keen to be included, but they'd all had their fill of Prosecco, so they made sure he's on there in all his glory. Yo then showed it to Harris and Beaumont, and the plan for revenge was hatched. Yes? Tomlinson: definitely no. Why, have you seen my name appear anywhere on our Hannah's Facebook page? Do you have data tracking showing I've actually been on her page? Have you, bollocks? Jameson suggested the following: to be fair, I don't think it would be difficult to set up a false Facebook account and keep an eye on Hannah. Dean: like you do when you go about your everyday perving looking at girls. Tomlinson: oh no, don't start that again. Change the record, mate. What are you trying to say, or are you jealous? You seem like someone who has problems with the opposite sex, if you ask me. It was apparent that the interview was going nowhere. Tomlinson was not going to admit being in touch with his sister, which would have suggested him having access to Jackie Burrows' photos. Also, it seemed like he'd never admit to Harris having gone too far, and that Beaumont and Tomlinson merely wanted
Givens to receive a revenge beating. So DS Dean and D.I. Jameson were left scratching their heads. The duty solicitors thwarted the process by intervening dozens of times, which prevented John's questioning establishing any sort of rhythm and stopping him implementing his usual divide and conquer strategy. He pondered, if only these legal representatives realised how much they massively increase the chance of offenders walking free, many of whom are guilty of heinous crimes. He also wondered how many solicitors would still represent the accused if their own loved ones had ever been attacked, robbed, or abused. Quite bluntly, he doubted it. And so to the final appointment with C.S. Loretta Squires MBE. John Dean felt like a dead man walking as he paced the corridor down to her domain. She was usually in commanding, almost dominating form, but not today. There were just a few days until John would retire, and she demonstrated understanding, almost compassion, as she actually apologised that this case, John's case, would not be making it to court. As a favour to John, Loretta had submitted all his evidence and his reasoning dossier to the Director of Public Prosecutions, but they weren't sufficiently satisfied that the public taxpayer would have value for money if any more expense were committed to trying to implicate the three lads from Stoke. Loretta started. John, I'm afraid that all of your hard work and endeavours have been inspiring to be part of, and your passion for wanting to take the case across the finishing line, in other words to court, has not quite gone our way, I'm afraid, on this occasion. No one could question your dedication and diligence, how you professionally arranged the arrests and escorting of the three fellows from Stoke to Bournemouth, but I'm afraid that a decision has been made that, despite there being a motive for them to carry out retribution, there is unfortunately no witnesses, no DNA evidence, no CCTV evidence, no confessions, and no surveillance suggesting any of the three suspects' vehicles were either en route to Bournemouth or returning to Stoke on the appropriate dates and times. They also have references from employers referring to the reliability, the honesty and the integrity of these three gentlemen. Dean butted in. Gentlemen? I wouldn't personally describe them as gentlemen, ma'am. My son's a gentleman, he's a fireman. Your husband's a gentleman, he's an accountant, ain't he? But those three are not gentlemen. I know that sounds bitter, and believe me, for the past few months I've done nothing but breathe, sleep, eat and drink the three scumbags, a.k.a. Harris, Beaumont and Tomlinson. And, if you don't mind me saying, ma'am, they're shifty, devious, manipulative and absolutely guilty. I have no doubt. Squires. Yes, John, I know. Sometimes we get a feeling in our bones that we're onto the right target and we zone in, we go for the kill and we arrest. It's just that there's then layers of society to work through. Culprits might have supportive families. They might have super smart legal representation. They could have employers who will vouch for them, even cover for them. And then there's politicians who claim the odds are stacked against individuals from certain social-economic backgrounds. Then there's the brick wall of the DPP and the CPS to try and bulldoze through. It's a new world out there, John. What will you do with your retirement, sir? It felt good to be called sir by Loretta, and for a brief moment John bathed in the glow of her warm words, and then he replied, I like fishing, so my son and I are going to be chasing carp and the like in our small dinghy. I've also got a few walking routes mapped out and a ton of books on rugby and motor racing. I'm going to get stuck into those. I won't be bored, but I will miss the camaraderie of the boys in the team. Squires corrected him. And the girls. I would feel better if you included us, John, you old rascal. Sorry, Mom. I am a bit of a dinosaur, aren't I? It's probably the right time to be putting me out to pasture. Look, put these 3 scoundrels out of your mind. You did not let us down, John. There's always a proportion of slippery eels who slide through our fingers. It would be the same result no matter who we'd put in charge. D.S. Dean, hold your head high at your retirement party next week and then enjoy the rest of your life stress-free. We won't abandon the case entirely. In honour of you and due to your dedication, the file will remain open. We'll keep you in the loop if there are any developments. Thank you so much, John. Goodbye. And with that final word, John's days at Dorset Constabulary were virtually over. And what became of the other players in this story following D.S. Dean's retirement? Well, his sidekick, D.I. Jameson, was promoted and he was thought of as a more steady pair of hands by C.S. Loretta Squires. Dean's opposite number in Stoke, D.S. Henry Jackson, also retired and is currently sailing a small yacht around the entire coastline of Great Britain. He's currently moored in his original hometown of Oban, Scotland. D.I. John Spencer remains in his post, methodical, does everything by the book sort of guy. Some would say mechanical and robot-like. A little dull, perhaps, but nevertheless a good servant to the people of Stoke, having first moved there in the early 90s from Ipswich to complete a law degree at Staffordshire University. What of Harris, Beaumont and Tomlinson? Well, they don't change much, gallivanting about a little. Harris dipping his fingers occasionally into things where they shouldn't be, but all 3 of them slowly, at a glacial level of speed, maturing into reasonably reliable fathers to their offspring and partners to their women. Their working hours being so odd and unsociable means they never developed a regular pattern or rhythm to their lives compared to, say, the teacher Givens, who came after them during that crazed period of his life. But their lifestyles are not of their making. A society built on being open 24 hours per day means that the likes of Harris are needed to work through the night at seedy clubs and casinos, and the needs of hotel guests mean that people like Beaumont have to be available 7 days per week, not 5. Also, in these consumer is king days, Tomlinson can be delivering goods to Glasgow one day, to Cornwall the next, and the day after that might be on his way to Sussex. Such is this need for a culture whereby if I want something, then I need to have it, and I have to have it delivered to my doorstep now. People are adapting, they're being flexible, they're getting used to this new world, and Harris, Beaumont and Tomlinson are servicing and supplying society, day and night. Yes, they made bad choices as youngsters, very bad, but people do eventually grow up and sort of grow into their own skin. Everyone absorbs wisdom and develops their own wisdom. It's never too late. I guess we'll never know for sure who killed Givens, and if it was the 3 lads, it's as if they've made a pact to never discuss it again. So, they'd survive the trauma of invasive questioning, of being accused, being suspected, and we're all free to continue with their everyday lives. D.S. Dean vowed that eventually, one day, one of them would slip up, would boast to an indiscreet acquaintance who would ultimately reveal all to the law out of a sense of civic duty.
and of guilt at knowing what really happened. Dean felt that there was not only the motivation for one of this trio, but also the know-how and past form on how to deliver such brutality. It's them, I'm convinced. Just as the three of them taunted the mind of Mr. Givens, the three of them are now tormenting me as I'm about to leave the force once and for all. I wanted to crack one of those bastards, but it looks like, whichever one it was, probably Harris, he'll always be the one that got away. And so the indiscretions and audacity of Jonathan Givens had not served him well. An ordinary life, compared to most, had met an extraordinary, horrific end. And all because of this revenge rebound.